and my partner Julie will be very happy. She was quite, well, not quite dismayed, but a little upset that she wasn't able to be here. She's got to work, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It is, but she'll get to hear the recording. So
yeah.
So
Hi, Julie.
Yeah, she'll love that. Thanks, Dicken. That's cool.
She's going to hear the recording.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I suspect that'll be our listening menu again for tomorrow. So what I wanted to ask you about was when we did the book talk, there were two things that came up. One was free will, which I'm still, I think I understand what Sid is alluding to, but I'm not sure. So some light shed on that would be really cool. And the other one was you made a comment about how, of course, we can affect other people. And of course, I tried to listen to it again and couldn't find that particular snippet, as so it goes, right? But there was something where you kind of, I don't even recall what we were chatting about, and you just said, well, of course you can affect other people. And it was a very matter-of-fact way that you said it. And of course, I've always kind of thought that because it's our thinking in the moment that creates reality, that our ability to affect others is limited, if not non-existent. So those were the two things that I was kind of hoping to get some wisdom from, or get some wisdom about.
Well, the only answers ultimately that are going to be of interest to you or Julie are ones that make sense to you.
Sure.
Because otherwise it's just an opinion, it's not wisdom.
Right.
Right? Free will is not a principle. It's a way of talking about things that can be helpful to some people who don't think they have any choice in life.
Okay.
Don't think that they can think or not think. So for some people, the idea or notion of free will is very helpful. If it's not helpful, it's just a concept, so you throw it away like any other concept.
Right.
I mean, people have different opinions about free will. You hear them all the time. And Sid was not interested in trying to have anyone believe his opinion.
Right.
So opinions or ideas or concepts are only helpful if they're helpful. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what anybody says about free will.
Right.
You know, principles are forces in life like nature that it doesn't matter whether people believe them or not, they're still true.
Right, yeah.
Right? So that's a different category than an opinion, which somebody made up because it was helpful or useful.
Oh, I see. Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you'll hear a lot of different opinions, or you might even hear Sid Banks contradict himself.
Constantly, eh?
Yeah. And that's when he's talking opinion, and he's usually sharing that with a person or a particular group because it's responsive to where they are at that time. Like Sid has said very different things to me at different times as I changed and had insight.
Right.
But he never wavered when he talked about principles. He couldn't describe them, but he could point towards something that's always true, whether you believe it or not. Free will doesn't fall into that category.
Got it.
But for Sid, part of his experience was it was enormously freeing. Maybe I shouldn't even say for Sid. How do I know? For myself, there have been times when realizing that at any moment I can stop thinking about what I'm thinking about. Even if the thoughts keep coming, I don't have to pay attention to them. And I genuinely feel like that's a choice I can make anytime.
Right.
Now, you can make the point that when I fall beyond my personal thinking, there's not even a me or a concept of me to make that choice. And some people talk about that, but in my mind, both are simultaneously true. There's no me, and here I am,
We're having
Michael.
a conversation, yeah.
I mean, I love knowing that in my experience, my sense of me no longer exists. And then it doesn't feel like free will isn't even, who cares about opinions when you're not in the world of opinions? Who cares? You know, I don't care about inside or outside or paradigms or free will when I'm out of my mind,
Well,
which
yeah.
some people think is more often than not.
That's a good place to be, right?
My kids will often remind me that I'm out of my mind. So, but you know, one time Sid says, "Well, at one level of consciousness, people don't think they have free will. Later on, as they understand more about thought, they're super glad that they can think and not think. And then at higher levels, even still, you're not even concerned about thinking about free will. So it's back to not being an important or significant idea or concept. Now, even that's made up.
Right.
Even that is, concepts are only helpful if they help people look in the direction, sort of relax out of thinking so that something new, insightful, or helpful can come to mind. So if I'm talking to someone about free will and I see it getting into their heads, I'll take it all back and say I'm wrong and forget about it. And if it helps people sort of relax about life and feel like, well, I can make choices about things if I want to, it's, I mean, it's like the physicists. They'll say this table is here, it's solid. But then they'll say in truth, it's not.
Right.
So which is right? I mean, both are useful.
Right.
Both are true in that sense. And sort of that's how I think about free will. If somebody says free will can't exist because no one is choosing, I say, well, if you're beyond thought, if you're enlightened, that's true. I agree with you. If people want to argue about free will, I'm not interested.
Right.
I don't care. I'll take it back as a concept. Let's talk about the principles instead.
Right. Yeah, that's a helpful distinction to make, or a helpful reminder that the principles are the principles.
Yes.
Everything outside of the principles is opinion or concept.
Everything outside. And Sid talked about things that were not principles, but they can be enormously helpful in pointing people in a direction where they experience more directly their own wisdom. If I mean, it's not like concepts are bad and wrong in and of themselves. We use concepts to communicate.
Right.
Concepts at their best point toward what lies beyond concepts. Then they serve a purpose. If concepts only point to other concepts, then it can become a closed loop and people can really get back and forth, one idea versus another idea, one concept versus another. A lot of the Facebook dialogues, unfortunately, often are one opinion versus another opinion.
Yeah.
And free will is a good example of that, is you'll hear people become very opinionated about free will. I'm not attached to opinions about free will. I find certain things about free will helpful to me on a daily basis. So I think it's sort of fun to talk about it, but If it's not helpful to somebody, I'd rather talk about the principles than.
So they're let's talk about the principles then. Wow.
Even the notion of being affected, even that, it's not a principle.
Right.
See, I have a sense about what Sid meant when he said, no one on the outside can hurt you and no one on the outside can help you,
Right.
because there is no outside.
Right.
I mean, I love that. It's pointing toward the fact we live in the world of experience from the moment we're born until we die. So in that sense, there isn't an outside in our experience.
Right.
In our experience, we're living in our perceptions and sensations and ideas and thoughts and feelings, and that's what we're living in. But to say if you have like a universal ecosystem, that if you put pollution in one part of the ecosystem, to say it doesn't affect the ecosystem is nuts.
Right.
Even though you're saying it's all one system.
So can I interject real quick?
Please.
Do you think?
No, I'm just talking.
It's super cool. I when I asked you about this, I was like, well, this is what I wanted to clear up, like what I wanted to ask about. So you've cleared it up for me already, and I'm like, okay, let's see what else comes up.
Yeah, good.
If we're talking about pollution in an ecosystem, and this is, so now everything I'm thinking, I'm going, that's just a concept, not the principles.
Yeah, good. No, that's good. It's helpful to be able to make that distinction. Very, very, very helpful, Michael, because people only get tripped up when they start arguing about concepts, and there's tons of things that are not principles that can get people into their intellect. I mean, I just loved when I listened to Sid. After a while, I couldn't think.
Right.
So obviously he was using language in a way that helped me to experience more directly what it is to experience life unmediated by ideas and concepts. Right. And how absolutely beautiful moments of real peace, joy, love, aliveness, clarity happen to everybody when they fall out of the influence of their conceptual mind. That's what the principles are trying to point toward. That's the heart of the principles, is the direct experience of life as it is, not as it's distorted and mediated by our conceptual mind.
And I suppose that conceptual mind can include anything from your past or anything into your future.
The notion of time and past and future are totally made up by our conceptual mind.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, just to circle back for a sec, the ecosystem, we pollute one aspect, so we've got our ecosystem, we put pollution into one side of it. Do you think, and this is just something, a curiosity question, but do you think that if we're all part of one consciousness, do you think we can add and subtract to it? Like, do you think that if one person taps into the principles or the understanding, does that add to the collective consciousness?
It's all one, but it's the energy is constantly forming and unforming. And this is where free will can be helpful, is that we can either use the principles to create something really beautiful, based in understanding, or we can use the principles to create a lot of misery in the world.
Right.
That's where Sid would say we're free thinkers. And when you begin to have insight into the nature of the mind, you begin to create something more beautiful in the ecosystem.
Right.
Mm. I know, like when I just realized that what I bring to my kids mattered. It wasn't, oh, I can bring anything I want because I don't affect them. I knew that I would affect them. And it is true that they're still only able to have experiences created from thought, but you affect the ecosystem, people think differently.
I got you. Okay. Yeah.
Right? So I was just knowing, it's a little bit like it's normal to have colds, but we have free will. So most often we choose not to sneeze. You don't sneeze in Julie's face when you got to sneeze. Say, Julie, come here. I got a present for you.
Come here.
And if you did, you'd be changing the ecosystem very quickly, or she would be.
Come here, honey.
So because we understand that it's not a good idea to spread contagion, we wouldn't want other people to do that too. We're very careful about that. Well, when I began to understand that my thinking can get contaminated, that's okay if I'm responsible for it.
Right.
Right? That changed. I started bringing different things to my kids than I used to. It no longer made sense to bring psychological contagion to my kids. Right. So overnight, my parenting changed because all I had to do is pay attention to what feeling I was in and just wait until I was in a better feeling to have important conversations with my kids. And it overnight, it changed my parenting and how I parented. And over time, boy, did they notice the difference. And finally, my kids were saying, "You're different than all of our friends' parents." I say, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you guys never dump on us. You guys never yell at us. You guys never bring your upset and just throw it at us like we see happen in our friends' houses all the time." I said, "Well, I used to. I didn't know any better. I think I've learned something now that helps me to live with a little more integrity, to take more responsibility for what I bring into the world." That's why free will and affecting others didn't, I don't think Sid meant you can say anything you want to somebody because you have it that way. He was trying to make a different point, and people misunderstood it. He's trying to say we live 100% in our experience. Excuse me, I gotta get some water.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. This is very cool, by the way. If this ever gets shown beyond my partner and I, very cool. Dude's a rock star. A little better?
Yeah, that helped. No, I have allergies, and sometimes it goes right to my throat. And it passes pretty quickly, so I'm not concerned the water helps. So
not attached to it, are you?
No.
I had a thought. I had something to ask, and then I lost it again. What's striking me a little bit lately is that sort of staying in the free will thing, just like to humor myself for a minute. What I've noticed, or what I'm experiencing, is that when I'm not burdened by my thinking, it doesn't feel like I'm making choices at all. It doesn't feel like there are choices. It's just, there's this very natural progression of what comes
It
next.
sure is. Me too.
And
I don't even think about free will. Until people ask me about it, I don't think about it.
yeah. Well, that's what you said earlier. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. The other something that comes to mind to ask about, I'm curious about, is Sid, the idea of looking for a feeling, of following a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, I have an idea.
Yeah.
There, but like, can you, like, you know what? I'm just gonna go first, and then we'll see what you how you respond.
Yeah, please.
I started experimenting with that, like, it's probably about 2 years ago, and the experiment was, it was around calling my mother. I'd have the thought I should call my mother, and that always came with a good feeling. And then I would decide that I'm too busy, or I've had the thought, I'm 5 seconds from work, there's no point in calling, I'll call later.
Yeah.
And everything that came after the thought of call your mother kind of left me with a bit of a shitty feeling. Like, it didn't carry the same level of genuineness that the first thought did, which was call your mom. Yeah. And then I would talk myself out of it, or sometimes there were circumstances that, okay, well, to call for 3 seconds doesn't make sense. So I started trying to navigate, like, I try, it sounds kind of silly now, but I tried to start to consciously navigate life via my feelings. So if it felt good, I followed through with it. If it didn't feel good, I didn't.
Yeah.
And it started with thinking about calling my mother, and it sort of moved into, if I have the thought, hey, give Julie a kiss, I do it. Like I'm really trying to. So the question is, was Sid really pointing at feelings? Like, I see them as a compass almost now.
Yeah.
And I guess Sid,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say what Sid thinks in this case doesn't really matter, because it feels really good to me and true. But
well, if it feels good to you and it's helpful, then stick with it.
Yeah.
See, that's an example of listening to your own wisdom, learning to trust that, finding out for yourself what's helpful, what brings out the best in yourself and other people.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's great, Michael. I mean, if it's your wisdom that brings you ideas for how to do your life in a way that works better,
right,
is kinder, is easier, then you trust that and go with it.
Well, it's certainly,
that's his whole teaching was, you can't get wisdom from another person. You can only get it in the quiet of your own mind.
Right.
So part of that teaching then is helps us navigate our psychology.
Right.
Part of it helps us navigate in our relationships, and our feelings really do become a guide. I told you, my feelings began to help me navigate parenting, and suddenly overnight it made my parenting seem simple and effective. I was paying attention to the wrong variables. I was paying more attention to what I wanted to say, my thinking about that, as opposed to what feeling am I in when I talk. And that made a huge practical, psychological difference. My kids much rather that I talk to them when I was in a good feeling than when I was annoyed, pissed, bothered, upset, right? And it was, our talks were different. So that was delightful. I mean, that's when Sid talks about your feelings can be a compass. He means in a very practical, psychological way, like you're discovering.
Yeah.
Right? That's nice. So there's a lot of sort of applications of that, if you will. When you're in a good feeling, trust what you're thinking.
Right.
When you're in a good feeling, that's how your wisdom shows up in the world on a practical level, as just common sense or clarity or motivation or insight, or it's a feeling. So he was trying to get us away from being so caught up intellectually with ideas. And now this is a deeper, I think, deeper spiritual teaching, because he was saying as our mind gets quieter and quieter, in other words, as we let go of our intellect more and more, metaphorically, we close the laptop of our computer mind.
Right, 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 right.
And like we do when we're playing sports or enjoying life or doing something exciting, we often tend to fall out of we're not thinking about what we're doing, we're just doing it. When I ride my bicycle and I drive the car, I'm not thinking, okay, now I got to turn the wheel an inch. Now I got to do this. Now I got to put on the turn signal. I don't need to be in my intellect. As a matter of fact, I'm very likely to have an accident if I'm distracted by what I'm thinking.
Right.
So we need to disengage from our intellect at times. I just didn't know that you could disengage, in a sense, metaphorically, fall back further and further from your personal thinking and become more and more awake and present and alert. And in that quiet that's always there behind or before our thought, the noise of our thought system, so we're not paying attention to anything we're thinking. There's just this still point or quiet as you go deeper. And as you do, there's always a nice feeling. And when we're in that state of mind of quiet and just feeling directly the immediacy of life, that's when we're at our best. That's when more of that deeper intelligence that has nothing to do with the intellect guides us. Then I'm not waiting for insight, for choice, for decisions, I'm just living insightfully from the inside. I'm living from that space without having to think about it. So I'm just naturally, with ease, responding to my wife.
Yeah.
Ease, just knowing when to stand up and go get a drink of water. I don't have to be constantly in my computer like I used to be. I used to spend an enormous amount of time trying to think my way through life.
Well, what was just running through my mind as you were talking there, Dicken, was that we're on autopilot then. We're like, we're,
Yes.
I don't know how to articulate it beyond that. We're separate from our psychology. We're on autopilot.
Well, that's when Sid says you're aligned with the principles, or you have trust and faith in the principles to live you, and we just get our ego out of the way, and this deeper wisdom lives us perfectly without us having to figure out what we should do.
Right.
And boy, that's delightful. I joke around with my friends sometimes. I'm sure enjoying letting wisdom have her way with me today. I get out of the way, and then I just know what to do without even thinking about it, without planning, without deciding consciously, it's just wisdom is deciding, wisdom is planning, wisdom is moving me, literally moving my body.
Yeah, that's actually pretty clarifying. That's pretty helpful. Do you there's one I can't remember which audio it is now, where Sid talks about, and I realize he's speaking in metaphors. He's using a computer. He's talking about floppy disks, then, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So he's
yeah.
talking about, you want to feel sad, boop, and you put in the sad one, and you want to feel, you put in the happy disk. What seems to be making sense to me right now is that we we can't think our way to the happy place, but we can sure think ourselves away from it. And I don't want to sound too much like I'm looking for, approval of my thinking or, or anything like that. But it's like, it really feels like there's just nothing I can intellectually do to get to the principles, to get to that place.
Yeah.
It seems so clear that we do just fall in and we fall out, and all I can do, I seem to be able to keep myself there. And I don't, I'm struggling a little. It's something that Julie and I have been talking about probably too much, but is it possible to keep yourself deflated? Is it possible to resist the natural buoyancy of universal mind?
Yeah, we can keep spinning out thinking that covers our well-being.
Right.
It's innocent.
Well, that was going to be my next sort of question, right?
In my mind, I've certainly experienced that many times myself in my life. As I keep thinking about something, and it just keeps creating more psychological burden or weight. I'm bumming myself out.
Yeah.
And it's really innocent. If I really saw that at that moment I did have a choice, I could. But what I find mostly I don't, because I don't have enough trust and faith that if I stop thinking about this problem, wisdom will take care of it for me. So at my level of consciousness,
Yeah, I gotcha.
because I know as my level has gone up, I have so much trust now that if I let go of everything I'm thinking, there's no downside. Wisdom just takes over. So I can have a horrible problem. I can feel really compelled to think about it. And then on some level now, I have a little more faith and trust than I used to.
Right.
So I'm less inclined to feel so compelled to hold on to it. And that's changed even in the last couple of years. I feel like I have more trust and wisdom now than then, and hopefully a year from now I can say the same thing again. That's what a higher level of consciousness means, is you see thought more as a temporary creation, not as truth. And you have a deeper trust and faith and wisdom. To me, that's what a higher level of consciousness or understanding is. It's not an intellectual thing. It's through insight you've come to have more trust in the system, how it's actually designed to work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't use ego to override the system as much. Sometimes still, but becomes a matter of degree.
Right. So then, once we've had an insight of what at whatever level, so my experience of it mirrors yours. Just we're different amounts of time in it. But it's like once the dam is broken, it seems like it's impossible to stop it again. The recognition of the principles, once you have it, seems to me to be a permanent thing. And it also feels so I'm like 2015, so 4 years in to my experience with them. But it really is starting to feel like there's nothing to do. Like it's like for one reason or another, something clicked, and everything that's happening after that click is just happening.
Yeah.
And it feels like, I mean, just like the way you're talking about it as incremental and relative to before, it just, the idea of there's nothing to do is starting to ring truer and truer to me, you know?
Nothing to do psychologically. That's true. It's like learning how to ride a bicycle. When you first start, you're thinking about it all the time, and after a while, you're not thinking about it. You're just enjoying balance. You're enjoying riding. You do very little thinking about how to ride.
So it's you know you come to trust your abilities to ride.
Yeah.
The same way that you come to trust the truth of the principles.
Well, you're really trusting your abilities is really you're trusting wisdom.
Right.
You're riding a bicycle. It's like because it's
Yeah,
that knowing, it's that deeper knowing that knows how to live us beautifully.
I just realized that I was getting caught, or I have been getting caught, sort of in a separation between physical doing and say spiritual doing. But no,
Yeah.
it's doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so that's a game changer, man. That's cool. That's a game changer. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Darn, I didn't. Yeah, okay, that's cool. I didn't really see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I suspected it, but I didn't know it. I feel like, okay, that's cool.
Hey, Julie, did you just see this guy have an insight? That's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's kind of that's what it feels like too. Yeah. And now I've got nothing left to say, man. I can just sit here and ponder for a while, or better yet, just go have dinner. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So wisdom, yeah, it really, wow. Okay, yeah, it's absolutely 100% all encompassing. It is life force. It is every action we take. It is every thought that we have.
It can't be separated from anything in life or anything we do or any, it's all part of the same. It's a little bit like, sometimes, and just recently I've been thinking of wisdom. I've always loved the metaphor of the ocean. I use it in a lot of different ways, but in the ocean, you've got waves, you've got currents in the ocean, you've got depth, all the same thing. They're inseparable.
Right.
And all of life that's visible are just the waves. And then this movement of energy are like the currents, and the depth is like the still source out of which everything arises, including the currents. Right? So you've got stillness, you've got movement, and you've got form.
Right.
That's three ways of saying the principles. Thought is the ability to, out of nothing, create specific forms. So the trees are divine thoughts, literally. They're living manifestations of the life principle, right? You've got the movement is from nothing, things move into form. It's a dance, right? And you've got a source, which is mind, which is still, but they're inseparable. They're all one. So sometimes Sid would say there's only one principle.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Can I just the one paradigm, the stuff that Oh no. Oh goodness, Valda.
Keith.
Yes, Blevins. Yeah.
They're no longer calling it the single paradigm. They're calling it the three principle paradigm.
That pretty much answers the question. Because
Keith and Veld are dear friends, and it was making it sound like thought was separate and more important.
so thought was as they were coming at. So when they were, I never investigated that.
Oh,
When they
well,
were
they were just emphasizing one part
okay,
of the Trinity and saying, all you have to know is that thought creates feelings, thought creates experience. And
right.
they emphasized that, and they stayed with that until people saw that more and more deeply.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Right. So some people started saying, well, what other people talk about when they talk about consciousness or mind, that they're not talking about the principles. Because the principle in their mind was thought creates experience.
Right.
I mean, we've all been growing up, right? We all get attached to our way of teaching, and then suddenly we forget that it's just made up, right? And so we think how we teach is the right way, or that happens to everybody I know. It happened to me, certainly. So it's just nice to come back, as nobody understands the principles. There was like somebody saying, well, I understand God, and let me tell you what God is. Right? It's like no one, when Sid was on his deathbed, he says, I've never met anybody who understands the principles. Because number one, it's impossible to understand the infinite nature of life and the infinite potential and possibility of life with our intellect. So anybody say, I understand it, as if it's something the intellect can grasp and hold on to. That's not the principles.
Right. So,
principles are formless energy, but we can intuit. We can experientially intuit the fact that life is created.
Right.
And that there's formless energy and there's energy that takes form. And we can intuit that whatever is formed is created from that same energy. So we can intuit the principles. And those intuitions blows me away. They help people because we're realizing to a greater degree on an intuitive level the nature of life and how it works. The fact that we can have insight into ourselves is unbelievable, is mind-boggling. It's awareness being aware of itself.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. It's God being aware of herself. It's mind-boggling. It's God creating the possibility that we can even forget the truth of who we are. Anyways, I'm just playing here.
But. Yeah, no, that's totally cool. I was with you for a bit, and then I lost you for a bit, and then I was back again. And
well, the important point, I mean, we're talking about sort of paradigms, and a paradigm by its very definition is a model. If you look up paradigm in the dictionary, and any motto is just a way of talking about something that can't be talked about or can't be described.
Do you think that, I mean, I agree that, it's not I agree or disagree, we can intuit. Why, and with all due respect to your background, how did psychology get it so wrong? I'm using the word wrong, but how, like, it really seems to me like this
I mean, we could say that about medicine. 100 years ago, they'd be sawing off your leg with a saw without anesthesia and without antiseptic, and cancer was a death sentence. And
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't that long ago, honestly.
no,
It wasn't that long ago you'd go to a dentist because one of the things they would do is cut you, but to let out blood, because they thought when people had fevers, it was in the blood, so they'd let out as much as possible. Some people say Abraham Lincoln didn't die because of gunshot wounds. He died because they bled him afterwards.
right.
He let him out. It just,
Right.
it's because that was standard practice. And Sid would just say it's an evolution.
Right. So
Mhm.
do you see it? I mean, when I first, when I had my first insight, I mean, it was, tears, and I was,
Yeah.
it was powerful stuff. And I spent the next little while kind of wandering around going, like, it was full blown, like, I was 10 minutes into the Long Beach lectures, and I'm just weeping. Like, I mean, I felt like I breathed for the first time.
Yeah.
And then it was probably a good, I don't know, it had to have been 3 days of walking around and looking at everything like something's different. And like, it was just very, very powerful. Do you think, like, from your perspective, as a practitioner of the three P's and psychology, do you see us getting closer to an evolution in our thinking? Like, do you see the field getting closer to that shift, to accepting a different paradigm or being open to the new paradigm?
I mean, look at it as an ecosystem. Every insight that shifts our consciousness not only helps us, it helps the ecosystem.
Right.
So your insight helped evolve humanity. I mean that, Michael. I'm doing a group called Healing the World based on the fact that shifts in consciousness have an impact on the people around us. They help. I mean, if I have more well-being than I did 10 minutes ago, I'm going to be bringing something different into my family and into my work and into my relationships that has an impact on life. That has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And in time and in space, so it takes time.
Yeah.
Right? Now, there's another level of change that Sid talked about, is spiritual change or an evolution that doesn't take time because it's not in time. And it's instantaneous. And in physics, they talk about entanglement, where you can have particles separated by thousands of miles. If they're entangled particles, you shift the rotation of one, and instantly, no delay,
Right.
the other one changes. If it traveled through time as a communication from one to the other, there would be a delay. There's no delay. And it's baffled physicists, and they've had to accept the notion that things can change in the universe spontaneously in different places at the same time. So Sid talked about that as spiritual change. So I have a shift in consciousness. It immediately begins to affect my family, but it also immediately has an impact on the overall level of well-being of the universe. So in that sense, it's affecting every part of the universe. It's affecting kids in China.
Right.
You get enough people who have shifts in consciousness, suddenly you see spontaneously changes all over the world that can't be explained. All of a sudden the Berlin Wall drops down. All of a sudden there's less violence in the world overall than ever before in history. Right now, people don't know that, but there is an evolution that's happening. And it's nice to know we can play a part in helping to create a better world, not only around us and in our relationships and in our families and communities, but we can also have an impact on the well-being of the world as we literally bring more consciousness into the world, more love and understanding into the world. That's hopeful. I mean, wow. That really inspires me to keep looking in the direction where I can have insight into the nature of life if it's benefiting my kids directly and my community still as in a ripple effect and the world immediately.
It just it just kind of sunk in that change on any level does happen from insight. So when you talked about the Berlin Wall coming down, that wasn't just attrition or economics, but that required people to actually have a shift in their consciousness.
It does. And then wisdom guides some people to more behavioral, new behaviors.
Right.
And other people to just live more fully in that experience of love and understanding. And both are valuable and important because its wisdom is guiding both people toward how best to utilize what we have to offer in this moment.
Right. Wow. And I thought I just had two little questions.
We are talking about spontaneous global change.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty cool.
Outside of time, who knew?
Wow. I just kind of fell into I got nothing left.
Well, that's good. Our time is up today. Anyway.
Yeah, perfect. No, it's good timing there. Well done, sir. So do you, I'm just, as we were chatting, as I was listening, it occurred to me that, like, is it okay with you if I put this out into the public? Or would, like,
you have your group, right?
yes.
I wouldn't mind if you share it with them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, Michael.
Okay.
Because then if you share with them, you're not just throwing it out there so that people can't ask you questions about it or.
Excellent point. Okay. Yeah, cool. Okay.
I gotta grab this call. That's my next.
No, that's, I'll, okay. Thank you so much, Dick, and I'll look for an email from you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah.